This is a quick run through of some of the new features in ADS 1.2.8.7. It's been a while since the last release, so I'll go through some of the new features. We now have a triangle mesh tool so that you can select it, click and drag to create a new triangle mesh, as well as the existing spline or quad mesh. The new triangle mesh supports improved support for mirroring, so you can double click on the mirror plane and it will create a mirror plane object in the x coordinate 0. So you can move it to adjust. You can also edit the shape with the keys or by dragging. The same applies to the spline mesh. There's a new triangle mesh join feature, so I can create two triangle mesh objects, select them both, and I can click this join tool, and it will create one object with both geometries and hide the existing source object so that you can reuse them. When you select the new object, when you edit, you can join them by selecting 3 points at a time and then clicking on the create point. You can also remove. There's a bug that's been fixed with the tool. If you hit the escape key, it will now select correctly the move tool and deselect the object selection. There is a new show hide scene button in the editors. So if I make this mesh object and I edit it, I can select solid or transparent, and now there is a hide and show scene button. The highlight selection has been updated, the performance is better, and it's more visible, but the quality is still fairly poor, so we will continue working on that. There are updates to the LLM integration. You can plug in an LLM to operate the ADS application, and ADS will have an API using natural language to perform several functions, and the context window will be managed with the instructions that you can type to tell it to take some kind of action, and then the LLM that you plug in can basically ask ADS what it can do, what its functions are, and the state and status of the scenes, and then take actions. So there will be a text-based interface for ADS, and then it can interface with an LLM. So you can, in this case, plug in a key for your, currently it's OpenAI, but we'll add local and other remote LLMs, and then you can basically get the two to work together. I'm not sure how useful this will be, but it's something that I think we can at least experiment with. Object and WebGL export has been updated. So it automatically exports scenes to the project folder and fixes several bugs. There's also a new scene export function. So in a large project, we can toggle which particular objects we want exported when we want to have a different selection when we're working on the scene. So a typical export will have all of a particular set of objects, but we want some for reference that we don't want to export. Okay, here's a WebGL 3D demo of the car project as exported. This is useful for visualization and sharing. It has some features. I can click on the objects. This is separate from ADS exports. I'll just run the demo so you can see. Adds transparency to the body so that you can see the structure of the chassis. The engine bay opens from the front so that you can service the engine, and the rear clam opens for refueling and cleaning. It's a manual, simple interior. And the front hood opens for maintenance and storage. So every time I make an update to the CAD model, I can export to the web. I can also change colors and properties. Pretty useful. Another update, quality of life, is the arc tube. Center line on bends is now a curved radius instead of line segments. The object and edit options for the XYZ keys. So if I hold a key down, it will lock it to that axis, as well as the editor tool if I edit an object. So currently the view is at an angle. If I hold the X key down, it's going to lock that point selection to the X axis or Y or Z. The arc tube has an export feature. So this feature is a work in progress. It doesn't merge joined tubes, but the idea is that you can use this geometry for FEA simulation. So the structure of the arc tube has been converted into a lattice. The compression of the material is simulated by joining adjacent points radially. So this is part of the FEA simulation that is still a work in progress. Another update is the constraint solver now uses the objects that the constraints are applied to local coordinate system. So this makes more sense when defining constraints. So I'll open an example. This is an adapter plate between an F136 engine and a Porsche G87 transaxle. So I'm going to make a plate that will adapt the two so you can see the scan from the engine and the scan from the transmission. And what I've done is added constraints for the mount points, and they are anchored to the center point object, which is a cylinder or a cube in this situation. And so now when I specify the anchor locations and either distance or XY offset or angle, it will use the reference from the coordinate system of the object that is anchored. So you can basically add this cylinder to the scene and then define a constraint, and it will locate it based on the anchored object's location and orientation. There is a circle tool, so you can click a point and then drag out to select a size, and you can also select an object. And if this object is a curve, so you can modify it like any curve, but as long as it holds the general shape of a circle, when it's selected, you can use this diameter tool and change the size. So if I change its view from the front, if I change the geometry so it's no longer a circle, then it doesn't recognize this circle. So one of the features is the dimension double click. So if I add an object, let's start with the center view. So I'm going to add a cube, click on the scene to deselect, add a second cube. Now I can select both and then double click on the tool, and it will create a dimension between, and there's no constraint. So the dimension is just going to follow the movement of the objects. So if I want to start making the dimension apply, see, I like that it's they're attached to the centers. So I'm going to anchor on the A, which is here. So if I move this, it will update, and I'm going to give it a linear distance. So now when I move B, it pulls B. If I move A, it will push B. I can also set the angle. And it will use the angle based on the coordinate system of this object. So I can rotate this, and it will rotate apply the transformation into the constraint. So those are some of the new features. There are things that we are working on that are not ready yet. One of them is an export to OpenFOAM, which is a CFD solver, which is not currently functional. We're working on the preliminary features in order to make that possible. We do have an attempt at a solver. But it doesn't correlate with, doesn't appear to be working correctly. Another feature is step file format support, export and import, which is close, but just not ready for release yet. That's coming soon. Another feature that we are working on is a 5-axis G-code export for 5-axis routing machines, which is getting close and will be available soon. And then the last feature that we're working on is a bridge function that will mirror the content from ADS and other CAD applications. First, we're going to support Fusion 360 across the internet so that you can be working in collaboration with other people. ADS can do what it's good at, particularly tube structures, intersections, notching, G-code export, bending, and you can work on projects with tube and surfaces, and then people can be using Fusion 360 and you can see an ADS project mirrored like a ghost, and vice versa. They can see your ADS models as a reference so that you can make projects that fit together. Later on, we will have functional interaction so that you can move, modify, but for now it'll just be display only. Lots of other things in progress, and we will post updates later.